Hi guys, this is Weekly from Weekly Disaster Games here, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the bosses that we've seen showcased within Final Fantasy VII Remake's trailers. Okay guys, so let's go over what we've seen so far, which are 3 returning bosses. We've seen the Guard Scorpion, the Airbuster, and the APS. And before anything else, I gotta say that they've done a really good job bringing these guys back to life. I mean, it's sure a far cry from the old 1997 models, and I'm definitely happy with how they modernized it. But let's start talking about the Guard Scorpion first, since that's the one we have the most information on. Now, before we talk about exactly how the Guard Scorpion changes, we gotta take a look at how it was in the original game. And in the original game, the Guard Scorpion is actually the very first boss you'll ever get to fight in Final Fantasy VII. And as a result of this, we get to see that the developers actually use it as a really good showcase for what to expect as you fight other bosses within the future of the game. And I gotta say, it's an extremely entertaining romp to go through. Now, is it challenging? Not so much. There's not a whole lot of prep time you can do with the boss, so of course it's not gonna be too hard. But it does showcase mechanics that you have to take advantage of in order to proceed with bosses throughout the game. For example, the Guard Scorpion has a mechanic where its tail will lift up, and if you attack it during this time, it will shoot a pretty devastating laser. And of course, if you keep on attacking while its tail is up, it's really the only way to lose this fight. So as a result of this, you really have to take note and respect it when the tail is up. And of course, throughout the game, you're going to see all sorts of other gimmicks that the bosses will have that you're going to have to take note of in order to actually win. Now, the other thing that the Guard Scorpion also showcases are weaknesses, and bosses do have weaknesses throughout Final Fantasy VII. In this case, if you use lightning magic, you're going to do a lot more damage than regular. So if you exploit this, you're not going to have too much trouble with the Guard Scorpion in general. The other last thing the Guard Scorpion shows to the player is bosses don't go down that fast. Now sure, if you play them the right way, they're not really going to be too difficult, but they will present some resistance, which means you're going to have to get used to knowing how to heal, and you're going to have to get used to actually using your limit breaks, because if the boss lives long enough and does enough damage to you, you get to spam plenty of limit breaks, which are some of the flashiest moves within Final Fantasy VII in general. And of course, for a player, this is definitely a hell of a way to start the game and really get to know exactly all the mechanics that you're going to have to deal with. So, now that we've covered how it acts in Final Fantasy VII, let's talk about the Guard Scorpion and how it acts within Final Fantasy VII Remake. So from the footage I put up, you can already tell that the Guard Scorpion is definitely a lot different than how it acts within Final Fantasy VII. So let's break it down. The first thing we can tell is it seems to have way more rockets, way more projectile attacks, and it's going to be firing like it's trying to kill you. And that is really cool. It really actually injects more of the action that really Final Fantasy VII Remake is going for. This is not a turn-based RPG anymore. This is an action RPG, and as you can tell with the Guard Scorpion, they're really showcasing how much more action-packed it's going to be. The other thing we get to see is the Guard Scorpion moves from its location and will even jump on walls. At this point, Cloud's not really going to be able to attack it, maybe with lightning magic, though we never get to see that in the trailer, but this is a really good opportunity to take a look at Barret and really utilize him within the boss fight, and this is something I really like. In the original Final Fantasy VII, yes, characters do have specialties, and they can be good for certain things, but realistically, you can use whoever you want, and you'll pretty much be able to get away with it. In this, however, we get to see that Barret is a critical member of the party, and if you don't use him, you may not be able to do any damage at all, while it's on the walls firing all sorts of rockets at you. So, at this point, when it's on the walls, you switch to Barret, you deal a lot of damage, and when it comes back onto the ground, you can either stay as Barret if you really like him, but I imagine Cloud might be more effective and really tackling weak points and really just getting a lot more damage done. I mean, he does have the Buster Sword, for example. It's got to be good for something. Now, the other thing I also really appreciate about this boss is the multi-stages that it offers to the player. It really does look like throughout the gameplay we see through the E3 press conference that the boss is going to be a little bit longer, it's going to be a little bit arduous, and you're going to have to pass general HP stages where once you pass the amount of HP it has, the stage will change and it'll act a little differently. And I am glad to see that the return of the tail laser comes. Now the gimmick acts a little differently in this game, but nonetheless, when you see that tail go up to fire a laser, you best get in cover, because if you don't respect it, it looks like a pretty easy way to lose. Now in the trailer, we never get to see exactly what happens if you get hit by that laser, but I can't imagine you'll live pretty long after it. So I also like that. I also like the fact that you have to take advantage of weak points of the boss, and you really have to exploit it. For example, there is this part of the boss behind the tail that you really have to attack as much as possible in order to take it down. That's not something that appears within Final Fantasy VII, but again, I also really like that. Of course, as a nostalgic guy, I do like how lightning again is some of the more effective damage you can put out, but in the remake, magic's going to be a little bit more powerful and a little bit more costly to use, so you're not going to be able to just spam it all willy-nilly. So I respect that as well. Now lastly, the other thing I gotta appreciate is the stagger gauge. Now the stagger gauge is something that's going to be pretty much throughout the entire game for any type of enemy, but I really am looking forward to how it's going to play within certain bosses. So it'll propose this interesting mechanic where you're going to have to play by the boss's rules, play by its own rhythm in order to stagger it, and then once you stagger it, it's your game now, and that's when you get to wail on it for damage. And I think that's really what we get to see from the combat here in the trailer. Now next up, I am going to briefly touch on the apps. And unfortunately, it doesn't really seem like we can talk about it too much. We only get to see a couple little shots in the trailers, and really the only interesting mechanic we get to see is that it jumps on the player and will try to wail on you. And that's about it. Now, does it do this in the original Final Fantasy VII? No, so I'm glad that they did evolve it a little bit to make it a little bit more modern. But in the original Final Fantasy VII, the APS doesn't really have too much to do in that game either. All it really does showcase is a giant tsunami attack, which I guess is one of the first AoEs that a boss will freely use on you, but otherwise it's not really too special in that game, and it doesn't really seem like it'll be too special in this game. It was just kind of a, hey, here's a boss, let's throw it at you type of scenario. Now in terms of the Air Buster, we get to see that they've really taken advantage of this, and truly changed it, and made it, I think, a lot more entertaining within the remake. Now in the original, the Air Buster's gimmick is, it has two sides, a front and a back, and you are separated from your party. Cloud will be on one side, and Tifa and Barret will be on the other side. And you have to fight it from both sides. Now of course, its back-facing gun isn't going to do too much damage, but if you're on the wrong side, the front side, when you have low health, you may actually go down. And of course, Phoenix Downs are a little expensive, so you don't exactly want to be wasting them at this stage in the game. So that's the interesting mechanic from that boss. So really you have to kind of like guide it almost like a sheep and make sure it doesn't attack you with full force when you're not exactly ready for it. And from what we can see in the trailers, we get to see a boss that gets off the platform and completely flies away and does all sorts of dive bombs, attacks you from far away, and honestly is just firing every single weapon it's got. Now I don't know if it has the back-facing gun, it may have it, that'd be funny if it does, but in this case we can again see that Barret is extremely useful because he's really the only guy that can hit it from so far away, especially when all you have is a nice little catwalk to walk on. So Cloud, I mean, he's cool, but he's not just going to sprout wings and slash that thing. That's just not how it works within Final Fantasy VII. So you're going to have to take advantage of Barret to really do some damage on this boss. And well, that's just about it from all we've seen from the trailers. Now as a brief aside, I do want to say I really am hoping and excited that we get to see some human bosses within newer trailers, because honestly, some of the human bosses are probably some of the more fun fights that you get to fight within Final Fantasy VII. And I'm really excited to take on the Turks, maybe take on a president, maybe take on other guys that I'm not going to mention for spoiler's sake, but otherwise, I cannot wait to see what they do with that. I want to see how they modernize that, and I think that's going to be some fun stuff to talk about when we have the information to talk about it. Now regardless of that, that's pretty much all there is to it for the boss video for today, so I hope you guys enjoyed my take on it. And if you did, you can like my video, and if you have any thoughts, suggestions, comments, or any sorts of ideas, you can leave them in the comment section below. And of course, if you really want to go that extra mile, sharing my content helps me immensely. The more people that see my content means the more successful I can be, which means the more videos I can produce for you guys, and that's pretty much all I want to do here. Now in terms on what you'll actually be finding on this channel, well, you're going to be finding a guy that covers RPGs from both the East and the West. We're talking about Mass Effect, Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy, and even some more things I haven't gotten to just yet. We did get an Elgato recently, so we can now record consoles. Very exciting stuff. So look forward to maybe potentially some Kingdom Hearts stuff, or maybe even Persona stuff, because I actually like those games quite a bit too. And of course, if you have any suggestions for games you want me to cover, drop them in the comment section below. If they're an RPG, there's probably a good chance I'm going to be taking a look at it. We've actually already gotten a comment about Xenogears, and honestly, it looks like it's going to be a fun romp. But we still have a couple technical difficulties to work out, and of course, the game is like 100 hours long, so bear with me on that one, because there's a little bit of legwork that has to be done before a video can proceed with it. Now with that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and this is going to be Weekly, signing out.